My name's Alex Lobato. I go to Hills Church and I work at Hills Church, and I've been here for a long time. I've been here for off and on for 18 years, but yeah, I mean, this is my home. This is where I go every day because I love it here. So I grew up in a good Christian family. I had good parents, sisters. I had good grandparents too, but I never really seemed to fit in at school. I always was kind of an outcast, didn't have very many friends. And when I got to high school, I started partying. I started drinking and smoking pot, and it was great. It would shut down the part of my mind that was judging me all the time, that was constantly watching over me. I ended up dropping out of high school and getting my GED, which I don't really regret because I started college immediately. And I really did well at college here at San Juan, but sometime when I was going to college and working, I started taking pain pills. Over time, it stopped being an occasional partying to a pretty consistent partying to an everyday thing. And at one point, I transferred up to Fort Lewis, but I couldn't manage the daily addiction and going to school up there, so I dropped out pretty quick. And at one point, I ended up in a pretty good relationship with someone I really just was crazy about, but that relationship ended up falling apart pretty hard, and it crushed me, and I began using drugs intravenously at that point. I had to have something every day to be okay. And if I couldn't get pain pills, I would get whatever I could find, coke, meth, anything, and it was all IV all the time. Ended up landing me in jail a couple times, a couple months in prison, like several times in jail, and in the hospital a couple times. 2 times in the hospital, I was pretty much expected to die, or at the very, very close to death. I always believed in God. Along my journey, I accepted Christ because I knew that he was God. I felt like Christ was in me, after I accepted him, but I wasn't living for him. I was living for myself, and I had Christ in me telling me I was doing stuff wrong. And that led to more self-judgment, which led to more drugs to try to cope with that. And I just kept doing bad stuff to get drugs, which made me feel worse. So I tried to do more bad stuff to get more drugs so I could cope with the feeling. Last time I got out of the hospital, I decided to get clean. And it was a gradual process. I had to give up stuff, like one substance at a time, because I wasn't able to do it all at once. But I slowly started I decided this cannot be my life. I wanted a better life, and I always thought at some point I'll have a better life once I give this stuff up when I want to. I always thought that at some point I would give up drugs when I wanted to, and I'd have a better life at that point. But the thing I realized about addiction, I started to pick up one of my times in rehab, because I've been on rehab several times, is that you never totally want to give up something you're addicted to. That's why it's an addiction. If people like, I don't want to do this, but I'm addicted, it's part of your mind likes doing it. So I just had to make that decision that I wanted a better life. The thing about drugs is that I was always trying to, whether it was drugs or relationships, because I've had several bad relationships as well, that I was always trying to fill myself with something external to make me complete. But it was always temporary. The drugs wore off. The girl would leave me. So everything's temporary. The relationships are temporary. The drugs are temporary. And they would always end. And I needed something eternal to complete me. And there's only one thing that's eternal, and that's God. We're designed, I believe, with the hole inside of us that God is meant to fill. And I think that's the source of addiction a lot of times, is trying to fill that hole with something else. Like I said, Christ was already living in me. So I finally just surrendered to Christ, started following that light, surrendering to him and filling that hole in myself with God. Because that's the only thing that can fill that hole in us. The name of hope is Christ Jesus. He is what gives you hope. He is the hope you have for eternity.